Hello everybody. So today's video, I want to talk about this idea of inspired action, and it gets spoken about a lot, especially when we read a lot of things around law of attraction, because the idea behind inspired action is that we're not just taking action for action's sake. We are getting into a place of alignment and we are taking inspired action from this place rather than action from a place of being unconscious, from a place of fear, anxiety, from wanting to move away from something. But I want to talk in this video a little bit about what it is really like to follow inspired action, because it's not really what I think a lot of people think it's going to be. And I think that's what makes people move away from it. It's what makes people think that they're doing it wrong. And it's what ultimately prevents people from following inspired action and then really benefiting from having done that. So I want to talk a little bit about what inspired action is and some of the pitfalls that we can fall into around why we don't follow genuine inspired action, and how we can start to really embrace this and really have a really fulfilling experience because we are following inspired action. So let's jump straight into it. So what is inspired action? Well, I've spoken a little bit about it in the beginning, but inspired action is, as I was saying, it's action that's being taken in a conscious way. So a lot of the time what happens is when we're in quite an unconscious state, we tend to think that in order to bring in the things that we want into our life, we have to just take action. We have to get very physical in our intentions in order to call something in. Whereas what we start to learn as we apply more consciousness to our life and to our experiences is that there's so much more than just taking physical action. It is about aligning ourselves energetically and mentally. And actually, there's a lot of things out there that say sometimes physical action is really a very, very small, tiny amount. It's a very small part of the process. And the biggest part of the process actually happens when we align our thoughts, when we get our focus in the right place, and we get our energy in a good place. We get our energy into a high vibration, and that is when we receive, that is when the intuition starts to flow through. We start to be able to access those thoughts and ideas, and that is when possibilities start to become available to us. That is when we start to be able to tap into connecting with our inner being, connecting with that more broader perspective part of ourselves. So really what we want to be doing when we're taking inspired action is we want to be getting ourselves into a place where our thoughts are aligned. So this means, for example, if we were to talk about something in your career, moving forward with something, an idea, maybe it's a business idea or just an idea in your job role, something like that. Instead of taking action because we feel that that is the only way that we're going to get the result, the outcome that we want, what we would ideally do first is we would get ourselves aligned mentally. So we would focus on the outcome, focus on the thing that it is that we want to achieve, that we want to call in to our reality. And we would align our thoughts, align our beliefs with a belief that it's possible to have this, that this is already done, that this is on its way, it's coming to us, and to get into a really good feeling place with it. So ideally, when we think about the idea of this this thing coming into our life, this how would you say it, this outcome being received by us, when we get into that mindset and we think about that, ideally this should spark thoughts of fulfillment, thoughts of joy, thoughts of excitement. It's going to get us into a high vibration, unless, of course, we are focusing on the lack of it. So we have to be careful when we think about the outcome that it is that we want. We want to be thinking of it like it's already happened. And this is, by doing this, what we're doing is we're getting ourselves into the vibrational state that is going to allow it to come in. And then what happens is when we're in this state, and it doesn't also have to be, we don't have to be focusing on the particular thing that we want. Just being on the same vibration as the thing that we want is enough for it to start moving its way into our reality. So you could be out with your kids, you could be out with friends, with family, whatever it is, and be having a fantastic time and just being in that really great open space. And this is, still going to be a way to receive that inspiration, to start calling that outcome into your reality. And when we are in this state, it's when we're in this state where our mind is very clear. So especially during things like meditation, just after meditating, it is when we're in these mental states that we are able to receive that intuition, that download, that idea that suddenly goes, oh, I could do this, or what about this, or I'd never thought about this. That is the first little seed of inspired action. That is your call to action, basically. When you receive a thought like that, when you receive a download that gets you excited, there might be a bit of fear mixed in there, because especially if it's an idea that's quite out there, that's going to force you to push past certain boundaries. But ultimately, that is your calling to take inspired action. So it sounds really simple. It sounds like, okay, we just listen for this, we get into this really good feeling place, we get into a high vibration, we align our thoughts, we align our beliefs, we get our mind nice and clear so that we're really conscious, and we just wait for the inspiration and we follow it. Now, technically, that is what you would do. But what I see happen, and this has happened for me, so this is why I wanted to come on and speak about it, because I've really started to notice this in my own mental work, in my own sort of consciousness practice, is that what can happen is you can follow that inspiration that you get. You can be called to inspired action. But then what can happen is it doesn't always instantly lead to the outcome that you desire. Sometimes it does. It depends what it is it depends what the outcome is that you want. And what can happen is when it doesn't instantly lead us to something, or at least something really obvious that it's going to bring that outcome, that desired outcome that we want, we start to then doubt it. We start to then think either that we are unable to listen for that voice, we are incapable of listening for that inspired inspiration to come through and to follow it. But then what happens is we start to then take lots of other action on top of it to kind of bridge that gap where we've lost that trust, we've lost that belief. So I'll give you an example of this. So this has come about for me, and I've become very conscious and aware of it because of my business. So when I first started, I was a bit unsure as to the direction that I wanted to go with my business and the things that I wanted to teach about and to speak around, and how I was going to package that up and what my target audience was and all of that kind of thing. But I still kept getting in this really good feeling place because I could feel what I wanted my business to be. I could feel how I felt when my business was thriving and I was doing something that I really enjoyed. So I was able to get into that high vibrational state quite easily when I was thinking about my business. But I was just quite unclear as to what those first steps would be, like how I was going to get myself to that feeling place with my business. And so in the beginning, I kind of did just take the inspired action. I started up an Instagram account and I just started posting things, and what happened was along came a lot of contrast. So I started to experience things that I didn't want along that path, and I was like, well, no, I really don't want my business to be going down that way, or or I'm really not enjoying this part of it now. So I started to experience a lot of unwanted things, and that started to make me think, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done this in the first place, or maybe it wasn't inspired action, that it wasn't an inspired piece of inspiration that I got. It was just a whim, or I was just following a whim. And this is where we start to lose that trust and lose that faith, because for me, what was happening was I was getting more of the things that I didn't want than the things that I did want from my business. So I started to believe that actually I'd followed that, those pieces of inspired inspiration that I had received, those downloads, weren't really downloads at all. They were just action for action's sake. But what I actually started to realize was, so I kind of stayed true to it. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep following it. And what happened was that because of experiencing lots of things that I didn't like, that I didn't want, what was actually happening, which I think I was unable to see at the time because I was maybe too close to it, because maybe there wasn't enough things almost that had gone wrong, was that actually all of these experiences that weren't working out the way I wanted them to were giving me more and more clarity every single time they happened. So it kind of felt like I was in this space where I was taking action for action's sake. But one of the desires that I actually had, which I suppose was kind of an unconscious desire that I didn't really realize at the time, one of my desires was to have clarity around what it was that, like, the direction for my business, because this was one of the things I didn't have in the beginning. I knew that I wanted to start a business. I knew that I wanted to teach people, and I wanted to talk about consciousness, and I wanted to infuse my spiritual journey as a mother, like, throughout all of that. But I really was sort of unclear as to how I was going to do all of that. And so actually what was happening was the inspired action that I was being called to take almost was causing me to do things that I didn't want to be doing. But every time I had those experiences, because I've become a lot more conscious of recognizing how I feel, recognizing when something doesn't feel good, when something doesn't resonate in my body, in my soul, I was able to quite quickly go, okay, that's not working, that doesn't feel good, that direction's not good. So in the beginning, it really felt like I was all over the place. It felt like I was chopping and changing from one thing to the next. And that was really hard to put out externally, because I mean, it might not have seemed that way to others, but certainly my perception of how others would view this was that I was all over the place. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. And to some extent, I sort of didn't. But actually what was happening was this beautiful path was, like, unfolding. And with every failed experience, shall we say, I was gaining more and more clarity on what it was that I did enjoy doing, the direction that I did want to be going in. And so I think this is where that's when we lose the faith, because what happens is, quite often when we get something delivered to us through law of attraction, it never comes in the way that we expect it's going to. And this is where we fall down, because we have our desire. And then what happens is we get so specific on how we want to receive that desire that it's not that we couldn't receive it in that way, but what we really want to be tapping into is leaning back and surrendering into allowing the experience, the desire that we want to come into our life in the best possible way for us. And that is where we have to release the control. It's like our job is done once we have released a desire and we have got ourselves into the right vibration, the correct vibration that's going to allow us to call that in. That is when we need to sort of step away from it, because that was what was hindering me. I had this perceived idea of how finding my direction was going to come to me and how my business was going to sort of evolve, and it was completely different to how it actually worked out. And this is where we miss the trick. This is where we fall short on being able to follow inspired action. So we kind of start by doing this, we start following it, and then as soon as we don't get the results that we're expecting, we start to doubt it. We start to doubt our own abilities to be able to tap in to communicating with our inner being, with our higher self, our soul, whatever it is that you want to call it. And we just drop the process, and then we resort back to taking action for action's sake. And taking action for action's sake will get you there, but it will get you there in like the most painful, burnt out, stressful way possible. Now, of course, me going through lots of failed experiences and doing lots of things I didn't like wasn't particularly enjoyable, but it was a much quicker process for me to discover what it was that I actually wanted to do and the direction that I wanted to go in. And this is the other thing. So manifestation can happen really fast, but we have to allow it to happen fast. And that's when we have to allow ourselves to go along with the ride. As soon as we feel that inspired inspiration, we have to have trust, we have to have belief in ourselves that we've been able to recognize it. We have to know what state we were in when we felt that inspired action, or that inspired inspiration to take that inspired action. And we then have to go with it. And that's when we have to lean back and say, okay, right, now I'm going to go along for the ride and see what happens, and be open to where it's going to take us, and be open to how it's going to get us there, and to try and remove some of those ideas that we have around the way in which we are going to be taken to our desire. So, is there anything else that I wanted to say on this? So this is where I think it's really not what people think it is. I think what can happen is when people talk about how it's really enjoyable to take inspired action, that I believe is the stage beyond this. It's the stage where you really have moved into belief, where you have moved into an area where you aren't focusing on the hows and the whos and the when. You are purely open to the journey you're being taken on. And then that way your resistance is so low that not only does the manifestation of your desire happen really quickly, but then you're able to enjoy it, because what's stopping you from enjoying it at the moment is actually just your resistance. It's your resistance to being open. It's your resistance to the process and trusting in the process, trusting in your own abilities. That resistance is what is causing us to kind of have that bit of a lag in the process, and maybe not it feeling so enjoyable as what it actually could. So I want you to take this away today and really think about how this applies in your own life. Where are you not dropping into your own belief systems around your abilities to listen to your inner being's voice, to listen to your soul, your higher self, and trusting in that inspired thought, that little light bulb moment? Like, where are you not following it? And are there areas where you've just stopped following it because when you have, it just has not yielded the results straight away that you really wanted it to? So if you're watching this video today, take this as a sign to pick this practice back up. Inspired action is a thing, and it is a way that we can live life from ease. It's a way that we can live connected to that higher source. But we have some barriers that we have to get past in order to start enjoying that process, in order to start trusting in that process. So one of the ways that you can start to trust in that process is just to give it a go. Maybe don't pick anything that's really that you're really attached to, a desire that you really, really want. Pick something that's really simple. One of the things that I did a while back, a couple of years back, was I tested the universe for random things. And one of them was I wanted to see a cluster of blue butterflies. Now, I really wasn't particularly attached to that. It had no real significance in my life. It was just something that I thought, I'm going to put out there and I'm going to use this as a good example to test how law of attraction works, how following these inspired ideas actually works. And again, like, I had these preconceived ideas as to how I was going to see a cluster of blue butterflies. Now, at the time I was living in England, I'm in Wales, so we still don't have clusters of blue butterflies around here. So I knew I wasn't going to see anything physically. It was not going to be a physical cluster of blue butterflies, but I had no idea how this was going to appear in my reality. And how it actually happened was, so I'd taken my girls out for the morning and we came back home and I said, oh, why don't we put a film on? And we had just been starting to watch Frozen 2. We'd seen like a little bit of it. And I said, okay, why don't we watch it? Let's see if we can watch it the whole way through. It's just so we could watch something that we hadn't seen before that wasn't on repeat. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought we're just watching a film. You know, we hadn't seen it all the way through before. So we put it on. And we started watching it and, you know, we were having a lovely time, like, you know, having some lovely cuddles on the sofa. And there's a scene in it, I don't know if anyone that's watching it has seen that film, but there's a scene in it where Kristoff, one of the characters, he practices proposing to Princess Anna. And he releases the lid from a basket and out flies a cluster of blue butterflies. And there'll be people that are skeptical that say, oh, it's just coincidence, it's Disney, there's always going to be stuff like that in there. But that was never on my mind when I suggested watching that video, that film. And when I saw it, it was one of those goosebump moments because it was like, this stuff really does work. And so what you can do by taking something really simple like that is not only does it happen faster, because you've got zero attachment to it really, apart from a fascination to see whether it comes in, is you can then really, I don't really like to use the word analyze because you don't want to be getting too much in that analytical brain, but you can look back and see what you did. You can see what state of consciousness you were in. You can check what your vibration was. You can sense what your attachment level was to that outcome, to receiving that desire. And it gives you a really good foundation to then apply that to things in your life that you really do care about receiving and experiencing. So it helps to also build your trust in the process, because the more times you keep having those goosebump moments and you're like, oh, this was clear. I mean, everything is manifestation. Everything is a result of attracting things into your reality, whether they are wanted or unwanted. It is our focus that we place on a subject, on thoughts and beliefs, that is what is attracting our entire experience. But when you have those goosebump moments where you know you have consciously brought this into your life, that is when the trust starts to build. And that is where you start to believe more in your own abilities to hear those inspired ideas, those light bulb moments, and you believe in the process, you trust in the process of following the little breadcrumbs that are leading you to that outcome. So give this a go today. And actually, one of the other things I wanted to mention was part of this process is embracing contrast. It's embracing experiences that give us a clear I don't want this. Because know that every time you experience something you don't want, you instantly, whether you're conscious of it or not, you instantly know what it is that you do want. And your inner being, your soul, your higher self is there. It's there where that desire is waiting for you. It's already there. So, like in my example of my business, the more I was experiencing these kind of small little failures, almost as I was seeing it, was actually helping me to get more and more clear and gaining more and more clarity on what it was that I really wanted to do and the direction that I wanted to go in. So embrace the negative experiences, embrace the unwanted experiences, because they are defining what it is that you do want. They're defining your true desires. And we need to also remove this idea of failure. So I was seeing all of this as failure in my business because I was looking at it from completely the wrong perspective. Whereas when I look at it now, this was success, actually, in my eyes. This was me discovering what I wanted to do. This was me fulfilling one of my desires, which was getting clear on what I wanted to do, the direction I wanted to take my business in. So when you start to look at it like that, it's not failure at all. It's just in the moment we see it as failure because we can't quite understand the bigger picture of it. But this is where things like meditation, really help. Getting into things like gratitude practices where we're getting into that higher vibration. It helps us to raise our vibration enough to get into those higher perspectives, and then we can start to discover these things a lot quicker, and then we can run with them rather than fight against them. So that is it for today. So I really hope that this has inspired you to start taking more inspired action again, to start trusting your own intuition, your own inner voice. It is not guiding you in the wrong place, even though you might think it is. It is getting you there in the quickest way possible, in the most appropriate way possible for you. So pick this process up again, start to trust in it, start to trust in your own abilities. And if you enjoyed this video, then I'd appreciate the thumbs up, give it a like, and if you're not already, subscribe to this channel. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.